feel like this is business venture 3 for me. I'm just going to be a
Man, we are going to capitalize after this podcast.
I'm going to be a harmed atheist and just say. All right, go for it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar, where we try to bridge the great religious divide one adult beverage at a time. I am your host, Jay. Don't you dare say God bless you to me when I sneeze, Stooksbury. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Ty. I will not let my kids read or watch Harry Potter. Gallenback.
That's right.
That was a mouthful to say right off the bat.
That was a rough start.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well,
I guess the good thing is that we're starting with a little heavier hitting adult beverage this week.
Yeah. I had kind of a rough day today, so I put in the request for whiskey rather than beer early on to Ty. And he is quite the bourbon collection. It might actually be worthwhile just posting a picture of it.
We should do that.
Yeah, I'm quite envious of it, actually. But, yeah, he was happy to abide, and, yeah, here we are. And we might have a few more slip-ups because of it. But,
there you go.
Yeah, it's totally worth it, though.
So what'd you end up picking out of the collection?
Well, I picked the Jameson Triple Distilled Irish Whiskey Caskmates IPA Edition, which was a very lovely and thoughtful gift provided by my co-host, which I've just returned back to his collection to make it a communal thing, because otherwise if I just went home with it, I'd probably just drink it by myself, and I need a buddy at least so I'm not a pathetic drunk anyway. But yeah, it's amazing, to be quite honest with you. I'm always a big Jameson fan. I can drink it like water, but this is exceptional for a whiskey, and you probably have a little bit more background about it than I can.
It is so I'm not a huge Jameson fan. I enjoy it in my coffee on fishing trips is about the main time I drink it. And my wife makes an incredible Irish cream every Christmas, nice. Which is wonderful. But yeah, that Caskmate stuff is fascinating to me in just the process of distilling it, sending it to a brewery, which they've done a ton of different ones now, letting them age some beer in it, then getting it back and redoing the whiskey in those same barrels. And that one, I know for me last week when I tried that was one of the creamiest whiskeys I've ever tasted. It was delicious.
It's got a little body to it.
So
yeah. How about you?
I am drinking the Elijah Craig Small Batch Barrel Proof, which this was actually named by Whiskey Advocate Whiskey of the Year this year.
Nice.
And so this is actually, for the whiskey nerds out there, which I am one of them, this is batch C917, which wasn't technically the one that won the award, but it's still good. Like you said, though, these are a lot more kick than our normal beer, so things could get interesting. But with the topic of conversation, I feel like a good little warm-up is probably okay. Mm-hmm. Tell them what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so we've alluded to it in some previous episodes, but I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about tribalism, which is a topic that's pretty common nowadays. And for those that are unfamiliar with it, tribalism is basically a way to view the world where you have people in your group, and everybody who doesn't qualify to be in your group is instantly an outsider and deserves to be ousted from society, which is kind of boils down to a lot of different conversation points. We see it in politics. We see it in religion. We see it in, it's basically like high school cliques, but exponentially worse because it's adults with power and influence and military weaponry behind them to reinforce this tribalism. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what are the pet peeves that we have about our own tribes. We come into this already self-identifying.
Right.
You're a Christian, I'm an atheist. We apparently have our collection, our membership groups at our beck and call to battle against that other side. Right. But we obviously don't see the world that way. We see it as a much better place where these conversations can take place between the quote-unquote tribes. So I thought It'd be fun to talk about what annoys us specifically about our own tribes, me being what annoys me about atheists and what annoys you about Christians.
I mean, really, who's better to air your own dirty laundry in a sense than someone from that group, affiliated with that group, and gets to see it on a day in and day out basis. Yeah. If you look at work environments or whatever, employees always know the dirt.
Right.
Like if you want to get behind the scene of something, you always go to the people that are there day in and day out. And so this is kind of a chance to show that maybe the things that annoy Jay about Christians annoy me as well, and quite possibly the things that annoy me about atheists probably annoy Jay as well. They are not the things that define us.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, and I would say that we're more like diplomats.
All right, that's fair.
We're diplomats, but we're going to be self-deprecating diplomats today too, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously.
Right.
With whatever those labels may be, they're pretty petty, and the differences, like we've mentioned before, they kind of fade away once we have this conversation plays out a little bit more.
Absolutely, I think there's a lot more things in common than not in common.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'll kick us off with a light-hearted one because this is just a personal vendetta, I think, for me.
And we like personal vendettas.
That's right. So I know some of you know this, and it has been brought up on the show, but my day job is as a professional magician.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
which is inspired by Satan.
Apparently so. And I have had more encounters than I would like to admit where people legitimately think what I do is satanic. And it's not just against me personally, but anytime I see parents or hear about parents or other people who are banning their kids from watching Harry Potter or reading the books about Harry Potter because that is Satan. I think the amount of stupidity that requires just annoys me more than anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that those people get associated with me because they are Christians just drives me absolutely nuts.
Right.
I mean, it's a fictional story. It's one of the better written, pieces of fiction, for that age group in a long time. And if you can't have an educated conversation with kids or other people about what fiction is, then I think there's a lot bigger issues in the world to tackle than that. So
then just to set the record straight, though, I obviously said this in the intro, would you let your girls read Harry Potter, or have they?
My wife is dying to read Harry Potter with our oldest daughter. As soon as
she's right at the cusp.
She is.
Yeah.
Yep. So she reads at a very high level.
Yeah.
So we think she could read them, but we want her. It's actually more for like a scariness factor.
Sure.
But it has nothing to do with the content of the book. Like we're so excited to read the books and then watch the movies with her.
Yeah.
For sure.
So they haven't seen the movies then?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Nothing at all.
Okay.
So, yeah. It will happen.
Okay.
It will happen.
Good. Well, and I'll freely admit I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan because I do think it does have like a weird kind of cultish following to it. But I will say that I really appreciate how that book series has inspired younger people to get into reading.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I was working at Boys and Girls Clubs, we always had a set-up time just for doing homework, and if they were done doing their homework, and they said, well, you need to read a book, all those kids would just they would fight over Harry Potter,
Right.
you know, and it says something to the effect of the author and the book series to how important a piece of literature like that can actually make an impact for young people too, regardless of the scary, you know,
Right.
satanic connotations of it.
You know, magic is the devil.
Do you get a lot of people, as far as your magic show, that hint at it, or
at the show, people are generally coming in, you know, excited to see it.
Sure, but I meant mostly people in our community.
Well, I have had a handful of people. One of my favorite encounters, I'll just share this as a real life happening. I am in a local restaurant. It's a Mexican restaurant in Montrose, hanging out with a buddy. We're at the bar. He was fluent in Spanish, so he was speaking to all the servers and stuff and told them that I was a magician. And so they, El Magica, Magica, like that's what they all kept saying. Mm-hmm. And if I'm butchering this for the Spanish-speaking community, you know, I apologize. I'm very white. But we're there. I start doing some card tricks. People are freaking out. It's fun. And then this older guy at the bar, I can hear him kind of mumbling under his breath. And he slowly is getting closer and closer to us. And I can hear him mumbling. And finally, he gets close enough that I can hear what he's saying. And under his breath, all he is muttering is, El Diablo. El Diablo, just repeating this over and over again because he legitimately thought I was possessed by Satan. So, and that is not the only time that has happened in my life.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. That's weird.
Just tell me about
it. So, one thing that annoys me about atheists is the connotation that you can't have any semblance of a God reference directed towards you. And I alluded to that in the intro too. You don't say God bless you to me, and you can't even say Gesundheit, you know, because that's German for God bless you, you know. So there's this weird, you know, very adamantly opposed stance about people offering nice gestures to you too, and it could range to as well as people saying that they're praying for you, you know. And there are some elements, and I'm not going to say all of them. I think that's something that's that we can consistently apply throughout all of these. Is that this isn't a blanket statement for all of them,
of course.
But there are people who get really annoyed when if you're an atheist and they say, someone says to you, you know, I have your family in my prayers or something like that, you know, and they feel like it's their duty to respond to that. Say, well, actually, I don't believe in God. You know, like that's my bad atheist impression. But there is a that weird just aggro vibe that I just don't get. You know,
right?
Because I think a lot of the time, you know, I say bless you when someone sneezes. It's just common courtesy, you know. Right. I don't think it attaches any sort of statement of divinity or what my beliefs are in a higher power. I'm just being polite, you know. And the same thing with people offering prayers or things like that. I'll give an example. This last weekend, I had a lady who approached me about my city council run, and she goes, "Well, I just want to offer just one piece of advice for you, and you're going to think this is really weird, and I'm just going to say it anyway. Do you know who Jesus is?" And, I mean, I was instantly like, yes, I know who Jesus is. I've heard of him.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard of him. And then she proceeded to just basically say, you know, if you believe in Jesus, you know, good things will happen to you. You know, if you read his words and his thoughts, he provides a lot of clarity in life. And at the end of it, I said, you know, thank you very much. You know, I really appreciate the kind thoughts. and I appreciate your interest in my campaign, and thank you,
of course.
just for talking with me.
Yeah.
And I just left it at that.
Yeah.
But I know that if there is someone who's a little bit more of an antagonistic type atheist, they'd say, here comes the Jesus talk,
Right.
and they'd take that as their way to jump into some tirade about that person's belief system, and I just don't find it constructive.
Right.
At all.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a tangent, but why not? One of my college professors at my Christian school would not allow us to say bless you in class.
Interesting.
Because it actually stemmed from people that thought sneezes were possessed.
Right, yeah.
And so
they're trying to escape.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And so I always think it's funny when, atheists or Christians in the Xmas, not Christian, don't know history.
Right.
And so they ignore what they're actually fighting against doesn't mean what they think it means.
Right.
So,
do you say bless you now?
I do. I don't care. He used to always make us say, I think it was salud.
Yeah.
For health.
Which means health.
Yeah.
So your Spanish isn't that bad.
A little bit. So it's not good either. It's not good.
Bueno.
Yeah.
Or if you're in Colorado, Buno. Buno Vista.
Yeah. One of my really good friends spent a week in Mexico walking around saying "Hola, por favor." To this day, we still tell him and make fun of him for that. So another one of I'll do the second one I have here about just things that bug me about Christians. And one of them is this idea that we have to create this whole subculture. And so what I wrote down was actually using Christian as an adjective, that you have to have Christian music, you have to have Christian t-shirts, you have to have Christian clothing companies, all of that stuff, Christian sports drinks, whatever it is, everything has to be segregated or labeled as that.
Interesting.
And it drives me nuts because Christian should be a noun, about a person and a lifestyle and those kind of things. But when you start labeling it, it creates interesting moments. And this actually comes from a book, but is that music Christian? People ask that. Mm-hmm. But you would never say is that plumber Christian?
Right.
Why? Why do we have to have these different
You better make the holy water flow.
Yeah, there's something about that where I feel man, if someone is cleaning my drains and my pipes, I think that is one of the greatest service things ever.
Right.
And if there is something,
especially if there's hair, right?
In my world. If there is something that is more Christ-like than cleaning my toilet, I don't know what it is. I mean, so why do you have to label that? Why can't you see it? If this is what you believe, why can't you see those things and all things instead of So I hate when people try to segregate. And I mean, let's be real honest. Some of the worst T-shirts ever created in the history of mankind have been the Christian knockoffs of popular culture things. It's terrible. Yeah. It's terrible.
So you gave me an idea though, just a business idea. And I'm already copywriting it right here now.
He's buying
he's
buying the web domain.
Yeah, I just buy them left and right. Is there a service? And I can't think of the name of the company now. Where it's basically a way to search for different contractors or things like that. Is there
the Angie's List?
Yeah, Angie's List. Is there a Jesus list?
Oh, there should be, shouldn't there?
So where there is a Christian plumber,
you have to register as a Christian.
Yeah.
Can we do that and have you be the CEO? Because that would make that so much better in some ways.
But what are we gonna call it though? Angie's List is, I don't know. I'll work on that.
Jehovah List.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Yeah,
I like it.
Always scheming. one thing that always bothers me about atheists, and the one thing that I've always noticed about atheists, and this particular brand of atheists, is that they primarily live online. Like that's their main habitat. That's where they where they spawn. Um, you can have centuries worth of great theologians and philosophers from Aquinas, Kierkegaard, Schweitzer, and all it takes is for one neckbeard living in his mom's basement, eating Hot Pockets, to type the words, "Oh, you and your Sky Daddy," on Facebook or something like that. And that's all it takes is to refute, those types of apologetics and great philosophical traditions and things like that. And they're really happy with themselves. Like they think they've won an argument. There's a brutish, trollish nature of atheists online that just absolutely sickens me, and maybe I'm being unfair in my caricature, but I don't think I'm far off either. And hopefully they troll our podcast specifically for that. Yeah, I know. Where are those trolls? But yeah, that's something that always bugs me. They have these really ad hom type of arguments against Christians, and they don't really offer a lot of intellectual depth or nuance or things like that. And I'm not saying that like Christian or religious apologetics or type of theology type studies can't be refuted or things like that.
Right.
But there's this weird tendency to atheists that, especially those that cohabitate online, that think that they can refute all of those great thinkers with just really mean-spirited dialogue, I guess is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. I would actually say that probably goes both ways.
Yeah.
Anytime someone tries to refute someone else with just like yeah, well, your mama's fat.
Yeah.
Or, whatever.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't serve any purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The Sky Daddy one always gets me, too.
Yeah. We're not having this conversation on this episode, but we'll have a little offline conversation about that you will find very amusing.
Okay. I look forward to it.
So, another one I have down, which this one rolls around primarily about every 4 years, which is when any time that a church or a pastor decides that they need to preach politics. And it does not matter what stance that is, whether I agree with it or disagree with it. The fact that you are taking what should be a wholly constructive platform and using it for something that is so much below that. If you actually believe in the things that you have claimed to believe in, and you're taking these things and saying, "Oh, but we need to talk about measure 456." It doesn't matter. Like,
Jesus is against it.
Yes, I feel like that degrades everything that Christianity should be about in so many ways.
Sure.
And we've talked. I mean, there is no. Christians are not all Republicans, and Christians are not all Democrats, and there is differences in all those kind of things. And so if you stand up there and are preaching from the pulpit in an effort to convert votes, I feel like you're so far away from everything that is Scripture that it just drives me nuts. So I actually wanted to reach out to one of my friends, Chris, if you're listening to this. Your thesis in college was about this, and you should send that to me, which now I'm going to send you this podcast and make you listen to the whole thing. But you should send me your thesis on why preaching politics should not be taking place. So
nice. And that's actually that's a good segue, because that was one of my points I want to bring back about politics. And you're right, the notion that a religious identity is always linked with a particular political identity is an absolute falsehood. And to give an example, there's actually, as I alluded to before, I'm a libertarian. And there's a meme that we kind of circle around in our libertarian blogosphere, which libertarians live online too. I'm not going to lie. We're kind of trollish too. But it's the picture of the Joker from Batman, and the newer Joker, and he says, "Tell a room full of libertarians that you're an atheist, and nobody cares. Tell a room full of atheists that you're a libertarian, and everybody flips out," which is absolutely true. There's this weird connotation that if you're an atheist, or if you're secular or agnostic or humanist, whatever label you attach to yourself, you must be some type of left-leaning, progressive, democratic socialist, whatever. You're on the left side of the political spectrum, and it is absolutely annoying to deal with that, because there's always this weird connotation too that libertarians are somehow always associated with the right. So they think if we're just an extreme version of right-wingers, then we must be in bed with the Christian right, and everything that we believe in is absolutely something to be opposed to. And yeah, it's libertarians have a weird branding problem, so we're working on that. But yeah, and it's funny because there's a lot of things that that those who are of a left-leaning nature might find solace in the Libertarian Party and kind of the libertarian philosophy. Is that we were the very first party that openly supported same-sex marriage protections. It's actually been a pro-choice party for decades. There's a lot of stances about being anti-war and against the drug war and things like that actually a lot of left-leaning folks can identify with. But the second that you say that you have that label, forget about it.
Right.
They've written you off right away. And so, yeah, that's always a huge frustration for me.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe topics for other times, and we've referenced it some, where tribalism creates this thing where if at any point you show hints of being able to step out of your tribe,
right,
you're like exiled and excommunicated because you're corrupt or whatever.
Right. There's a great book that I read in college called The Cultivation of Hatred by Peter Gay. And it's one of my favorite books of all time. It was actually written by a man that escaped the Holocaust and lived to try and figure out how the hell did this happen. And he was a social historian, so he gets really into the kind of the cultural components of things. And he traces it all the way back to the 19th century. And one of the kind of key conditions that he talks about in his book is the creation of a, quote, convenient other. Someone who is an easy scapegoat that, you can use as a straw man, as a caricature of what's wrong with society.
Right.
And we see it now today. The Muslim community,
I was going to say the Muslim
is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yep.
The connotation of just immigration in general. These are convenient others of people that are not a part of you.
Right.
And that's why you should be in favor of whatever type of power structure that's in place that's going to protect you from those types of evils. So,
absolutely.
And that's why I'm always very cautious about that type of rhetoric about, we need to ban Muslims coming into the country, and these Mexicans, they're rapists, they're criminals, but some of them might be good people, as our president has said. So those, I think that's, and if I could recommend a book definitely read Cultivation of Hatred by Peter Gay, but just that point alone is what really plays into that tribalism. Yeah. It's not necessarily about your personal identity, but it's how you demonize those who are not a part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I have not read that book, but I think just based on what you've said, the thing that I would latch on to that is as soon as you start seeing humans as not part of your tribe, there becomes issues in that. When the reality is we're all in this thing together.
Right.
Like it should all be one tribe in essence.
Yeah.
And so when you start being able to segregate people out, you create the ability to dehumanize anyone.
Yeah, and I was just going to throw that word in there, is that when a label or an identity becomes more important than a person's sense of worth or dignity or whatever quality you want to attach to that, when that label becomes more important than what is the essence of being human, then I think we're in for some trouble.
Yeah. On that note, one of my big ones is just, well, I'm gonna throw this word out there and use it, even though I feel like it gets overused often in Christianity. But I am going to say the hypocritical nature of Christians, specifically in regards to homosexuality, is one of my biggest.
You would reference that.
Yeah, is one of my biggest pet peeves. And I'm not going to go into theology. I'm not going to go into scripture references. None of that. That's done and overdone everywhere. And if you really want to dive into that, feel free. But just the ability for Christians in a very public and a very vocal manner to spew hatred at a specific people group is so anti-Christian to me that it drives me nuts. It's one of the things that one of my closest friends is gay. He's getting married in March, and regardless of theology, he's one of my closest friends. We hang out regularly. We go out for drinks. We have conversations, like all of those kind of things. And if you have the ability to say you hate someone, regardless of, because my wife says this all the time, hate the sin, not the sinner. Well, that's not what you're conveying at all by actions. Like,
sure.
You are showing a specific people group that you feel they are worth less than everything else. And one of the reason I chose to actually use the word hypocritical in this nature is in studies and research and college, and more as a warning sign for students, it was thrown out there that there's been studies done where when pastor conventions show up at hotels, the pornography usage on televisions and stuff skyrockets.
Yeah.
And so to be able to take this group that has a quote-unquote sexual sin and target them with all of this hatred and fury, and then look at the pastors that are leading your churches who are also dealing with a sexual sin and not convey the same type of animosity, you're absolutely skewing everything out of proportion.
So as a side note to that, I've thought about creating a betting pool. Whenever
business venture number 2.
Yeah. This is just a hobby one though. If I've always noticed that whenever a new evangelical kind of rises to fame,
right?
They've got their mega church. They've got quite the bully pulpit. And then they might shift to a very kind of anti-gay agenda. They're very involved with politics. They've got a very open public stance about it. I always try to figure out when are they going to be caught with someone of the same sex in a hotel room or in a bathroom or something like that.
Right.
Because there is a weird, kind of trend of, and plus also when those people kind of put themselves out there, they make themselves more easily exposed to like the tabloids and things like that.
Yep.
Where it's like, okay, what's the over under? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be over and under that? There's a weird nature of that like you said, that kind of hypocrisy, that kind of talking out of both sides of their mouths,
Right.
where what happens in the public sphere is not necessarily what matches up in the private sphere too.
Right. And even if it's not homosexuality, we've seen it a lot with infidelity or mistresses, which,
everything with the Catholic Church too. I mean, there's
and my whole thing is like those issues should not be deemed different.
Mm-hmm.
Like they need to be seen on the same plane one way or another. Those people need to be treated with the same respect. I
Right.
guess, so.
Yeah, and I'll freely admit that was probably why I was such a jerk in high school when it came to that notion of being kind of the antagonistic atheist too. I grew up with gay people all around me. Like my mom was a teacher. There was a lot of men that she worked with who were homosexual that I was exposed to at a very young age. And when I realized that they were different from me, I was like, oh, but I still like hanging out with them and talking with them. And I was like, I didn't think of them any differently,
Yeah.
And I remember the very first time my mom scolded me for using the word fag. And, she just kind of beat that into me. It's like, no, that is not appropriate. This is why. She gave me kind of the whole background of it.
Right.
And ever since then, I've always been gay positive, and it was just something that just seemed so elementary to me. That was the best way I can describe it, because and plus also in high school too, there are a lot of kids growing up that are fighting with that identity where they have to really keep that quiet, and that just drove me crazy. Like I couldn't understand why these people had to just deny who they were for their own safety.
No, it's terrible.
And this goes beyond a Christian thing. This goes beyond. This is a bully problem. This is just a widespread cultural problem.
Right.
But I always felt like it was being reinforced by kind of the Christian clique of my school too. So that always drove me nuts too.
Yeah, there has definitely been hatred spewed. And for whatever reason, this is one of those cases I feel like where maybe even popular culture latched onto that to be able to use Christianity as a reason to take that action.
Right.
Which I agree. Like, I mean, I've worked with high school kids. I have heard stories from my buddy that, through high school, how they had to kind of hide and dance and, work through that. And, man, I cannot imagine, not being able to be yourself.
Right.
Like, that is the scariest thing to me. Because of the fear of someone just lashing out at you and just pure hate. Like, there's nothing else about that. So.
And it's just so simple too. Like one of my biggest pet peeves about just those kinds of bigots in general too is that it's like, do you actually know someone who's gay?
Right.
Do you know someone who is Muslim? Whatever the identity that they're spewing the hatred at. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say no. They've never met someone like that. And I think that's the why these conversations are so important, that people are interacting and forced out of those comfort zones, that they realize that they're just people that probably enjoy whiskey or whatever, and they probably don't enjoy whiskey. There's all these different things that if you break it down, you can find
a lot of common ground.
Yeah, and you can find gay Republicans too.
It's true.
There's a whole lobby of them. There's the log cabin Republicans. So yeah.
And I love the stories on a more positive. I love the stories about people who are surprised by those encounters. where they get to finally experience someone that's different than them.
Right.
And all of a sudden, everything changes.
Yes. It clicks.
Oh, it's so phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's necessary to experience those people on a personal level that are different than you.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. Next thing that bugs me about atheists is that we live in a perpetual state of victimhood. And I know that you could probably say the same thing about Christians too. But there is this woe is me, the sky is falling every time that some public figure says, God bless, or there's discussion about, 10 Commandments in a public area or things like that. And on a surface level, I agree. Like, there's obviously needs to be a separation of church and state. But I call them the new atheists. They are insufferable about always fighting back and always making it about religion. They play the religion card or the anti-religion card, And I mean, I'll just go ahead and say it. I think what's happening with our high school and that particular lawsuit is kind of a case in point of that. And what makes it even more interesting too is the mob mentality that can play into it within a heartbeat. And again, this goes back to the online nature of atheists. The second a story comes up about one atheist that is being wronged, without really a lot of detail, it might be their account of what happened, and instantly the atheist community just goes to bat for this person. They don't know them personally. Right. They just instantly know that this person was wronged because he was an atheist, or he or she was wronged because they're an atheist. And one of the things that I'm always appreciative about being skeptical about religion and politics and things like that is that one of my key components is that I want to see evidence. Show me evidence.
Absolutely.
But in the nature of kind of that online conversation is that there's a complete lack of evidence. And again, I'll refer back to what happened with our local high school here too, is that there was an entire community online in the atheist blogosphere that rallied behind someone with just one side of the story. Right. And to me, that is completely antithetical about what being skeptical is about. It's about being objective as to the best of your ability, getting the evidence, weighing the evidence, observing, kind of applying the scientific method, and then coming up with your conclusions with a nuanced sense based off of the information you receive. And that is not the case for the atheist community. If there's an atheist that's wrong, get the ACLU, get the any other the legal entities that are out there that to instantly get signed up on a lawsuit, start crowdfunding for it. Let's start raising money. We're going to help this person fight the religious theocrats that are oppressing them. And it's just this utter nonsense,
right?
Without a lot of evidence being presented.
Yeah.
And it drives me up the wall every single time.
I feel like this is business venture 3 for me. I'm just going to be a
we are going to capitalize after this podcast.
I'm going to be a harmed atheist and just say, and all of a sudden, they're going to be funding something else. But
we're going to make this happen.
We could,
and this is going to be the seed money for our Christian Angie's list,
the Jehovah list. That's still working title.
It just sounds like you're saying Jehovah less, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there may be, Jehovah Witness, then that you don't want any of those people coming to your door.
You know what? If you're listening to this podcast now, if you made it this far, shoot us your ideas. What should we name this?
I like it.
Yeah.
If you were to create a list for providers that was all Christian based, what would it be?
Oh, there's only one provider.
Manafromheaven.com. I bet that one's taken. But,
Probably.
So.
The problem is that as soon as we start crowdsourcing this, someone's going to buy up the domain rights right away.
Yeah, and then we're gonna, there'll probably be some atheist trying to capitalize. Or something. All right, so I'm gonna do one more, and I'll make it fairly brief, just because it's probably the largest one of my, pet peeves towards Christianity, and it may not be as passionate or in a lot of ways, and it's also, I think it's one of those like unsurmountable in a way that you look at this and it drives me nuts, but I also fully am aware that the odds of me being able to fix it or ever even see any progress in this is slim to none. And that is the idea of just denominations in general. And that the fact that a group of people that claim to be believing in the same entity have found enough reasons to bicker and create separation that we have all these different people groups with their own personal beliefs really eats at my core in a way that I don't understand how I totally get having different theologies. I get it. There is not a person on this earth that can read the scripture and understand it fully. So having disagreements, having different views, I mean, that's how rabbis started. But the inability to see past that and see a bigger picture of what it's all about absolutely drives me nuts.
Thanks, Martin Luther.
That's, so he may have took a stance that needed to be taken at that point.
Yes, he did.
Let's be real honest about that one. But, creating a whole different, at this point, it's not that. It's, I like 90s Christian music and not 2000 Christian music. Like, I think we should worship without instruments or with instruments or, water, not whatever.
Right.
They are things that if you stop putting them on a pedestal and stop putting them on an altar, people would make their own decisions about them, which would actually probably create a stronger body of believers than telling people, no, I'm going to hold this up higher than the things that I actually should be holding up as important and create my own little sect with them instead of saying, hey, these are some of the things that we can disagree about. Let's talk about them and create conversation. But instead of that, no, I'm just going to tell you what you should believe. And that drives me nuts.
So just as a side question then, do you feel that all the different denominations, Methodist, Presbyterian, Baptist, I can go on and on.
There's a few of them.
Yeah. Do you think that those particular barriers are specifically about people that just are comfortable with the immediate people that they're surrounding themselves with? And it's not necessarily like a deep-held theological belief, but it's more like this is my bowling league buddy.
Right.
Do you think that's kind of the case, or
in today's day and age? I think almost 100%.
Really?
And especially in a community the size of ours,
sure,
you will see, and I've seen it. I mean,
because we have a lot of churches here.
Yeah. So I've been in and involved in church for about 18 years now of my life. And you can watch families and people groups who, as specific things change in the church, not theology, the worship leader, the pastor, the Sunday school, the music, whatever it is, as those things change, you move to find an area you're more comfortable with the day-to-day operations.
Interesting.
So it's not, which is fine. I don't think there's a problem with finding something that you agree with and you feel good about and you enjoy.
Right.
Finding your preference or the place that you feel. And yes, the people is a big part. You know, there's movements of people based on who's there as well. But I think very little of those movements are based on theology. And so you may initially settle, if I've seen people who move into town who initially settle in a location because of a given denomination and they have an association with that denomination that they think they're going to get. And then they either realize, yeah, this is everything I was looking for, or no, that's not quite right. And then try a different denomination out to see if that's where they fit, I guess.
Interesting.
So.
Next business idea.
Is this 4 or 5?
I don't know. I'm losing count. What if we can create like a fantasy football version of Christian denominations, you know, where you can kind of trade and shift rosters a little bit based off of who the heavy hitter is and who can get you the most touchdowns.
The problem with that is that at this point, I feel like most of the heavy hitters are straying away from trying to associate with a specific denomination. And so that would make that a challenge.
All right. Well, we'll just X that one.
First pick is going to be the Pope, and then after that, it's going to go downhill.
Who gets that first draft pick? Yeah. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to send that down another rabbit hole.
You got one more for us?
Yeah, I got one more, and I'll try to keep it brief too. I think the one thing that really drives me nuts, and it's something that I've gone through my own personal journey about, is the notion of not necessarily being. I think the problem with the current atheist community is that a lot of them are not necessarily atheist; they are just anti-theist. And to me, and I probably have, in my more compulsive days, would probably be closer towards the latter, not the former. And I want those who identify as atheists, those who identify as secular, to really be open to the idea that someone who believes in God can be an ally for you, and just to keep that particular idea open in their mindset, that you can find someone who is on the exact same page with you with whatever issue or cause that's near and dear to your heart, that does not share your theological viewpoint of the world, and that really shouldn't be the end of the conversation. I've come to terms, like I've worked on a lot of different causes, a lot of different issues, where I've worked alongside Christians and Muslims and whatever the case may be, and back in the day, that would have been the end of the conversation. You know, it's like, well, these guys don't agree with me on this. Like, that's the most basic viewpoint right there. You know, end of discussion. And then nothing moved forward with it because I had this kind of really bigoted view about it. And I really, this is again the mature Jay that's now speaking to you now, is the idea that because you disagree, and I think that's kind of the tagline we've moved with this too, is just because we disagree doesn't mean we can't have a conversation. Right. Doesn't mean we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that we can magically vote the same way too, unless you're, not registered. But that's another sidebar. Anyway, but yeah, I really just want people to think beyond these very petty differences and think about what it is to be human, what it is to improve dignity, and what it is to just make our lives fruitful and prosperous and peaceful without this petty nonsense getting in the way.
I cannot think of a better thing to end with tonight. Really. I think that... Bam! There it is.
Drop the mic. No, can't drop these. They're really nice. They cost a lot of money.
They did. I think that's the perfect way to go out, because the opposition of that is everything we're fighting against with this.
Yeah.
So, hey, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those things. If you're not following us on Facebook, Jay takes care of most of the content for that. And every time something gets put up, I'm always like, man, that's good. So if you're not following that, make sure you do that. It's almost all at Christian and an Atheist. The Twitter one's weird because of words.
Yeah, because of weird Twitter stuff.
Yeah. But
just go to christianatheist.com. It'll link you up with everything you need to know.
That's right. And hopefully soon you can find us on iTunes and all the other...
Still waiting. I'm waiting for the iTunes gods to approve us.
Yes, but he doesn't believe in them. So they're refusing.
Maybe that's the problem.
So I'll start praying to them.
Okay, thoughts and prayers.
Hey, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been a long episode, but I love this one.
Yeah, this is a good one.
This was a good one. So thank you for listening tonight. We are a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar where we try to bridge the religious and all other divides, one adult beverage at a time. Cheers.
Cheers.